I read the job description like 10 times to make sure
Mm-hmm.
all keywords are included, all responsibilities that they're looking for in terms of day to day there. I'm highlighting some of them. I mean, you don't have to really fake it, but you have to just find similarities in your experience. What the mistake I've seen, because I've reviewed a lot of these cover letters at Deloitte, because I was
Mm-hmm.
hiring also when I was there.
Mm-hmm.
Um, they don't include the details. They feel that the one who's reading the cover letter won't understand the details, which is not true. I mean,
Right.
I come from that experience, so I can understand the details. And I'm looking for that information. 2, 3 candidates are gonna like look exactly similar to you. They all have the best experience ever, but you can only hire one. So
Right.
now even though like consultant or senior consultants are taking the interviews, but they are not the ones who are deciding who to hire.
Mm-hmm.
So if let's say one of those guys between the three has actually networked, they have an edge.
Okay.
That's why minimum manager level you have to absolutely network. It's like no matter how great the company is, they pay you well, they treat you well and everything, but you are just like a small fish in a big pond.
Right.
No, you can't build your personal brand. No one is gonna know who you are apart from some of the customers you talk to or maybe your
Mm-hmm.
manager, right? Like it's just such a big company.
Mm-hmm.
Like in one project, I mean, the size of the project was bigger than the whole company I was joining.
Right.
So it was that kind of a scale, right?
Mm-hmm.
But if I would join this company, even though it was a risk,
Mm-hmm.
I would build my own brand. Obviously, like not easy at all. Like it did crush my confidence because I was still like relatively new to product. Uh, the first thing, I mean, that came to my mind was how am I gonna get my next job? Because I had
Right.
no experience, right? Like I had just started in product because like technically my experience at Deloitte should count, but most companies will not consider that as a PM role. Like
Mm-hmm.
they will see it as a consultant role.
Right.
So that was the first concern I had. The market in which I got laid off was really brutal, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like companies were laying everyone off left, right, center, like
Right.
bigger to smaller companies. Like
Mm-hmm.
obviously, when you see the news, you only hear big companies laying off, but literally, like every small tech company had also laid off. It just did not make the news.
Right.
So where else like would I apply? Because if the companies are laying off, they're obviously not going to hire
Right.
immediately after the layoff. And no matter how hot a PM job is, as you mentioned, it's not the most needed role in a company. It's
Mm-hmm.
it's required,
Mm-hmm.
but if the company is in a bad shape and if they don't have enough money, they could do without a PM for like a few months. Because
Okay.
when I accepted the offer, I did not know the revenue they were making.
Mm-hmm.
I did not know the funding they had. I just knew
Okay.
that they had good revenue, right? Like what is good? You got
Can
to
you
know
please
the
define
numbers.
us for the listeners because we want them to benefit? So, what's a good revenue?
So, like, I don't know the number, but what I'll
Mm-hmm.
tell you in terms of funding, right? Like, because
Sure.
sometimes revenue is not that great in companies because for tech, like
Mm-hmm.
it grows a lot. Like sometimes
Right.
company grow like 100x also, right?
Mm-hmm.
Now, my rule to join a startup would be like minimum series.
Hi, everybody, and welcome to this week's episode of the Harne podcast. Today, we talk about product management, and to talk about it, we have with us Rohan Arora. Rohan did his MBA from the Schulich School of Business in Toronto and is now working as a product manager in Thomson Reuters. What is very unique about Rohan's story is that he started working for Deloitte right after his graduation, but then chose to work for a small startup in Toronto. Unfortunately, he was laid off, but then bounced back to get his job at Thomson Reuters. Now, how did he manage to do it? And what valuable insights can we draw from his experience? We are going to unpack all of this on this episode. Before we begin, I request you to press the like button, subscribe to the channel, and leave us a feedback in the comment section down below. Now, let's listen to this conversation. Hi, Rohan. Thank you so much for giving us your time today, and welcome to the Harne podcast.
Thank you, Raghav, for having me. I know it's
It's a
been
pleasure.
long, but glad I'm here.
No, it's a pleasure. And I think you're worth the wait because you are a product manager, and that is a hard job. I think a lot of people want to be product manager in Canada right now. So please start us by telling us a little bit about your background. So your undergraduate degree, your work experience before your MBA, and what are you doing currently?
Yeah, for sure. So I did my computer science engineering from Bangalore,
Hmm.
from a college called PESET. Then I worked in Bangalore itself for 3 years. So I was a software engineer. That's how I started my career in tech. And through that, I was exposed to product managers. I was working with a lot of PMs in my
Hmm.
company. So I really liked the kind of work they did. So that's how I started my exploration here, and then did my MBA with you from Schulich, graduate in 21. So I wanted to get into product, um, but like the market wasn't that great in 21. So
Hmm.
I was trying other avenues as well. Got a role at Deloitte, which was a consultant in terms of title, but then it was also very similar to a product manager
All
because the
right.
kind of work I was doing, I was working with my own dev team, but the only difference I would say was the product I was building was for an external customer.
Okay.
That was the main difference. But I mean, day to day responsibilities were a lot like a product manager. And after that, I moved to a startup,
Hmm.
um, which was in 2022. I started in in March actually, and worked for almost a year. But
Hmm.
as you can see, the tech layoffs happened, and I was laid off as
Yeah.
well. And yeah, then I started my current role, which is at Thomson Reuters. It's also as a product manager,
Hmm.
and it's been just a month, not been long, so still exploring my way around here. But yeah, that's
And
pretty much my experience.
yeah, thank you for that. But now let's talk about why the MBA after software engineering. I mean, I know most graduates after engineering pursue an MBA,
Yeah.
but why did you do it from the Schulich School of Business? And were you able to get into any other B schools apart from Schulich?
So like I started my MBA exploration in like 2018 itself.
Hmm.
Started my MBA in 2019, but then the whole idea came about 2018 itself. So there were a few of my seniors from undergrad who had gone to US, Canada, doing their MBA, and I was in touch with them, getting their perspective why they are doing something like this. And I could have organically grown into like a product manager, start with an associate and things like that. But the kind of advice they gave me was like, if you want to do it, like now is the right time, because once you start your career in product, you do it for like a few years, then you won't feel the need to do it, and that time you'll be like you could have done it, you know, looking
Okay.
back 2 3 years. So that's what they advised me, and then I started my journey, and then US naturally was the first option that came to my mind,
Hmm.
but Canada seemed more suitable, more immigration friendly, so that's why I made the decision. And I actually did not apply to a lot of schools that time because I was actually planning to start my MBA in 2020.
Hmm.
I gave my GMAT in 2019 itself, and
Right.
I basically was running 1 year ahead of time,
Hmm.
just keeping giving myself, enough time to research once my GMAT result is in, so that I have time to research and do everything. But when I got my result, my family and my girlfriend at that time, who's my wife now, said like, just go for it, apply and see if you get something. So I did not actually apply that year to a lot of schools. Schulich was one, and there was another one called DGroot.
Okay.
So DGroot has a co-op program
Hmm.
that I got into. But I connected with few of the alums on LinkedIn just to see what they're doing, and Schulich seemed a better fit, because I could see they were working in a lot of banks as product managers,
Hmm.
in some of the small startups. I think in terms of location, I felt like Schulich is better located,
Hmm.
more closer to Toronto than Deloitte, so that's why I made the decision.
Okay. And you said in your answer that your seniors, the advice which you got was if you wait, then you won't feel the need to do an MBA later, right?
Yeah, like
So,
it's
mhm.
situational. Yeah,
So what was that need in your case? Like, why did you feel that you had to do an MBA? Because as you said, you could have just worked on and
yeah,
progressed to become a product manager. So could you elaborate on
yeah.
that, please?
Yeah, I think what happens is like in engineering, you are very tactical in the way you think. Like you don't
Right.
think of a business, right? Like you think of everyday operations.
Hmm.
As a developer, you get your requirements, you just start coding them. But like a product manager role is not that tactical. There are
Hmm.
things that are tactical, like probably that's 10% of a job.
Hmm.
But 90% of what you do is not tactical. Like you're thinking more strategically of
Hmm.
the long term. But in engineering you're not taught all of that. Like no one
Hmm.
tells you to think strategically, so to say, right? Like it's more get things done type of a
Yeah.
scenario. So I felt that if I don't learn this right now, then I probably won't become too good at it.
Right.
It's becoming a product manager, but there's also a thing of becoming a good product manager, right? So I wanted to make sure that, I have the education with me so that when I want to become a product manager, I'm like good enough and I can
Right.
grow also, because I could become a product manager, but maybe not grow that much. And that was just a thought back then, right? Like, I don't know whether that was the right decision or wrong decision,
Mhm.
but that was a thought behind it. Yes.
Okay. And I think this is the perfect segue to move into what skills did you learn and what skills are required to become a good product manager, as you said. So, what did you
Yeah.
learn during your MBA, which is helping you now?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, to start with, like, one of the first courses we had was like called Skills for Leadership. I'm sure you remember that too.
Right.
I think the kind of problem statements that we got,
Hmm.
I think we had to launch a product for kind of an untapped market. That was the first project we got. Now, as a product manager, you're always looking for ways to grow your product.
Correct.
Either you grow within your like current customer segment, or you look for additional customer segments. So the latter is what we actually did as a project.
Hmm.
So these are some of the projects that we do. Like, there was another um, course called strategic management. Now
Correct.
there we had to think of a company, like maybe a hypothetical or a real company, and think more strategically, like how should the company grow, whether they
Right.
should launch a new product or should they just continue in the same path. Think of the P&L of the product, and that's what you're doing pretty much every day. So I mean, projects are very, very important in MBA, and I think that's where most of my learning happened. Obviously theory is important for you to do your projects well, but the kind of projects we did,
Hmm.
I think those are really important. And I think as a PM, you are working with so many teams. Like, you're working with marketing, sales, and in my first year, like, marketing was a mandatory course, even though my
Right.
specialization was not. But
Hmm.
learning marketing, and that was the first time I was doing a course in marketing, because
Hmm.
I come from engineering. So that marketing course was so important, because
Right.
I work with marketing force almost every day. And
Hmm.
I now understand, the kind of jargons they use, the way they think about growing things, how customer messaging is so important.
Hmm.
So those things were how I learned through my MBA, I would say. Definitely. I mean, I don't think there's any other way for me to learn that.
Right. So, doing projects and practical learning is what helps you more than reading the theory.
Yeah,
Right.
at least for me, yeah. I mean,
Mhm.
definitely.
Right. So, with respect to product management, can you tell us exactly what is it that you do on a day to day and a broader level picture? Because, like saying I want to get into product manager is like saying, I like Indian food. So, there's no such thing as
Yeah,
Indian
yeah,
food. There's Punjabi, there's
yeah.
South Indian. So, what is it
Correct.
that you do exactly?
Yeah, I mean, see, product management has so many areas, I would say.
Hmm.
Like, right now, it's kind of still, I would say, a new role
Hmm.
compared to some of the other tech roles. Like software development, you can date it back to like 80s, 90s, but PMs are kind of new in the game. So some companies are still trying to figure out what a PM would do. To give
Okay.
you some example, my previous company was a startup. So
Hmm.
I was pretty much doing everything, like in terms of Scrum Master role, BA. I was even doing some marketing because it was a small company, so the roles
Hmm.
were not that well defined.
Right.
So I was doing everything there. Now at Thomson Reuters, it's a more set organization, right? Like, my
Hmm.
responsibilities are well defined. So I have a Scrum Master in my team. I have a BA as well,
Hmm.
and obviously a set of developers.
Right.
So what I do day to day primarily now is, because like the BA that I have in my team, they are responsible for writing down all the user stories.
Correct.
Scrum Master is conducting all the Scrum ceremonies, from stand up, sprint planning, things like that.
Right.
I am
Hmm.
not like the one who's conducting them. I'm present,
Hmm.
but I'm more of like an enabler to make sure that, if they have any questions, I'm there. So my responsibility is to think of the strategy of the product, like how to grow, what our OKRs are. I will tell you what OKRs mean for the
Hmm.
audience, but um, what the OKRs are and what are the KPIs that we are targeting for this quarter and the next couple of quarters. Are the developers ready to take the new requirements that, I as a PM is thinking about? They are,
Correct.
technically, I would say, capable enough to, build the things that I want them to build. Do we need to
Hmm.
hire more people to have additional capabilities? So more strategy than, I would say, day-to-day operations now is what I am
Okay.
doing. But it
Hmm.
obviously changes. As I mentioned, like my previous company, it was a lot of day to day as well.
Mhm.
So like go type of scenario. Versus now, like now it's more strategy because for doing every day, I have people in my team who are doing it.
All right. And so, like you said, it changes from company to company. There is no
Correct.
set requirement because this is a relatively new role. So the
Correct.
responsibilities are not set in stone.
Correct.
It changes
Exactly.
from company to company. All
Correct.
right. So, Ron, now please tell us about how did you get your first job at Deloitte? So, how did you prepare your resume? How did you network for it? And what's the job interview like?
Yeah. So, Deloitte actually, I saw a role from a manager I had connected to.
Hmm.
It was when I started my MBA because I was looking for people to connect in the industry. So consulting was still pretty hot, and I wanted to explore that as an option. So I connected with few managers from Deloitte, all the other big fours as well. And one of the managers I was connected to, he posted a role on LinkedIn.
Okay.
That was um, like a- like I would say a month before we were supposed to graduate. So I saw the role, and because it was just a month away, so I was ready to apply as well. I was actively
Right.
applying.
Hmm.
So, and it seemed like the right opportunity because they required some tech skills, but also some of the customer facing experience as well. So,
Hmm.
from my previous company, I wouldn't say I was like talking to customers every day, but I was still like interacting with some of the bigger clients that the company had. So I
Hmm.
had some experience with customer interaction. And so I reached out to the manager directly on LinkedIn. He responded and he only referred me. And he was the hiring manager as well. So he conducted my first round. The second round was more case experience. So they gave me a few scenarios that I had to answer at that time itself. And the
Hmm.
third was just a partner round. In terms of my
Okay.
resume, I had
And
prepared my resume.
can I just pause
Yeah,
you
yeah,
there
yeah,
for just a
yeah.
second? So was this a consulting role or was this a product manager role which you had applied to at Deloitte?
So, I mean, the thing is like because Deloitte is not a company that has its own product,
Hmm.
they always call a role as a consultant.
Okay.
Everyone at Deloitte in the consulting arm, because obviously there is tax and like other things, but
Hmm.
everyone in the consulting arm is called a consultant itself. Now your
Okay.
responsibilities will vary like tremendously.
Hmm.
Like one consultant you talk to today might be doing something totally different from some other consultant.
Correct.
It's just that the title is consultant, but the work you do depends on which service line you're a part of.
Right.
So the service line that I was part of, there it was a lot like a product manager because that service line is actually building products for
Okay.
external users. So
Okay. Uh-huh.
that's
And I
that's what you're
think
doing.
what I want to dig into is that, like you said, consulting was a hot field to get into, still is. So,
Yeah,
look,
correct.
what happens is a lot of candidates chase money, and it's pretty
Yeah,
natural to do so. Even I wanted to be an investment banker because they make a lot of money. So,
I know, I
what
get that.
what advice would you give to students who go for that fancy designation versus what they had initially thought that this is what I want to get into versus the hype? So
Yeah, I know.
when should they actually make that change and when should they stick with what they originally thought was?
So I think for me it was more about knowing what the role is about. Like I
Mhm.
wasn't after the consultant role. So the way I went with it is when I saw the opportunity, like Deloitte is a big organization.
Right.
What I thought was if I get into Deloitte in a more tech consultant kind of a role, I'll be able to sell myself as a PM as well later. That's how
Okay.
I thought. Like because
Mhm.
my ambition was always to go into a PM role. That's how
Mhm.
I started my MBA, and that was my focus.
Okay.
So I was kind of using Deloitte's consultant role as a segue into that. So what I
Right.
did was in my first round with the manager, I asked a lot of questions to know
Mhm.
like what my day to day would look like because I wanted to make sure that this is the right role
Correct.
so that I can use these skills and get into more like a PM focused role.
Mhm.
So I would say to your audience that like if you're if you have made up your mind that you want to do something, maybe you're not getting that same title, which is absolutely fine
Right.
because in Canada they will look for your past experience or
Mhm.
and slash or Canadian experience, so to say.
Mhm. Yeah.
So if you're not able to crack the interviews, get something that is close, like similar to that,
Okay.
because that's what I did at least, and it
Hmm.
worked for me. Sometimes you might not even get consultant role because there is obviously a lot of competition.
Hmm.
Try like senior BA roles because senior BAs naturally get promoted into a product manager role a lot of the times. And
Right.
if they don't get promoted, you can externally apply because you're doing, I mean, 75% of your responsibilities are of a PM. So you, because you're supporting a PM a lot of the times. So try like these alternate career paths if PM is not directly working for you, and similarly for other roles. I mean, try like alternate profiles. See what is similar, how other people are moving into these areas.
Hmm.
I mean, some LinkedIn research will help you. You can see what consultants at Deloitte have done in 3 4 years. Where have they moved in their life? Obviously, not everyone stays in consulting.
Right.
See what they're doing so that
Hmm.
you can also form your path that way. Um,
Okay. Yeah,
yeah.
that's wonderful advice. And I had rudely interrupted you while you were telling me
Oh
about
no
the
no.
interview process. So please continue.
Oh no, that's fine. I mean, what I was just saying is like, so I had the partner round, and I
Hmm.
think you had a question on the resume as well.
Yes.
Now, for resume, I had actually prepared my resume more PM focused.
Hmm.
And back then, the way I thought my resume was PM focused at least was just looking at other PM resumes, right? Like there was no other way for me.
Hmm.
It's something you learn along the way.
Hmm.
You don't know what's the best. So for consulting, I had few of my connects on LinkedIn, few of my close friends who are working in India as well at Deloitte.
Hmm.
So I reached out to them, just asked them, like what does Deloitte really want from their candidates? Like what are some of the plus points they need? Turned out like, that customer facing role is extremely important. Like you have to
Okay.
highlight that you can handle customers because Deloitte has really demanding customers
Hmm.
because they're charging their customers a lot. So obviously they demand a lot from the consultant. So I made sure that I showcased that. I read the job description like 10 times to make sure
Hmm.
all keywords are included, all responsibilities that they're looking for in terms of day to day there. I'm highlighting some of them. I mean, you don't have to really fake it, but you have to just find similarities in your experience that you
Correct.
probably have missed out
Hmm.
because you didn't feel they are valuable in what you're applying. So just
Right.
include those things like that. Is what I did. Cover letter was more of an ongoing process. I used to write a lot of cover letters applying for jobs and just learned it along the way. Used some online tools here and there. We didn't have ChatGPT back then writing it for us, but I mean, Grammarly was helpful, making sure that my language is good. So small little things help. That's what I did. Um,
Okay. And
but
could
nothing
you
else.
please
Yeah.
give us a few examples of keywords? So, like you elaborated, that customer facing is really important for the role of a product manager. So, could you give us a few more examples of what should candidates include on their resume?
So I mean, it obviously depends on the role, but
Right.
like my role at Deloitte was in a service line called systems engineering.
Okay.
Now, systems engineering is a lot about just building solutions. It could
Hmm.
be a full blown front end solution which has a back end system to it, or it could be just building like a service, or it could be a very little app. So, what you can do is if you have built something in the past, include details of it in your cover letter. Like people, what the mistake I've seen, because I've reviewed a lot of these cover letters at Deloitte because I was
Hmm.
hiring also when I was there.
Hmm.
They don't include the details. They feel that the one who's reading the cover letter won't understand the details, which is not true. I mean,
Right.
I come from that experience, so I can understand the details, and I'm looking for that information.
Hmm.
So try to be high level, but don't be like too high level. Like just don't tell me that you have built an app. Like you have built an
Hmm.
iOS app has no value to me.
Right.
So if you have built an iOS app, tell me that how did you reach your users? What are the things you did? How many users did you have? Daily active users, things like that.
Okay.
So it depends on what you have done. So there is
Hmm.
no set, I would say, keyword that I used. What I did was just give them enough details so that they understand that I understand the nuances of things
Correct.
because that's what your customers are looking for.
Hmm.
In terms of keywords, see, I would say it's like 8 out of 10 keywords are found in the job description itself.
Hmm. Right.
To be very honest, like
Hmm.
I did not Google the keywords to find what I should include. because eight out of ten are just there, like they're sitting somewhere in the job description,
Hmm.
and obviously not every keyword is useful to every candidate, right?
Correct.
They gotta have those keywords in their experience. So
Hmm.
some keywords which might be useful to you might not even make sense to me.
Right.
So pick out the ones that you can include
Hmm.
and then form a story from them.
Okay.
So I don't
And
know which ones to include that way. I
mhm.
know you had that question, but just make sure that you read the job description very, very carefully
Sure.
and then include that. So that's what I would say.
Yeah, certainly, and that's very good advice. But what are your thoughts on how long your resume should be? Should it be a one pager, two pager? Because a lot of candidates face this issue, like how long my resume should be.
Yeah, it's just such a weird thing, here that like it's it depends on the person who's like reading it also, right?
Hmm.
Like some people just like one pagers, some people don't like one pagers. So I mean, I have been a candidate for a while, and I'm probably gonna be a job candidate sometime in the future too.
Right.
So it's such a difficult choice, to be honest. I mean, the way I see it, if you can make it one page, then make it one page. But if
Okay.
you absolutely cannot, like if you have done everything you could and you have like some 10, 11 years of experience and you feel that everything is just extremely valuable, go to two pages, fine. Like now my resume is two page,
Right.
but when I was applying to Thomson Reuters,
Hmm.
it was one page. But
Okay.
now I have to include my current experience.
Hmm.
Then if I'm doing something, if I'm applying, let's say in future in the next 2, 3 years, there is no way for me to make it one page. Like it's just impossible. Like
Right.
although my pre MBA experience is taking like maybe 20% of my first page,
Hmm. Hmm.
but still like it's impossible for me because I mean we have done our MBA, we have done some projects that we want to highlight, we have experience. I mean I'm touching like 7, 8 years experience, so it's kind of becoming impossible for me. And
Right.
when I was at least reading resumes at Deloitte, I did not mind a two pager, to be honest.
Okay.
But if there is like too much information on those two pages, then obviously that's a problem. So
Hmm.
like you have to there's a caveat to it, right? Like don't make it two pages just so that it that you are using the full two page. If you,
Right.
as I said, like if you can make it one page, try to do it, but I think it's fine.
Yeah. So
There
two
is no
pager
right answer
only.
to it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Two pager only if it is relevant experience.
Yeah,
Otherwise,
exactly.
don't go
Yeah.
for
Just
two.
don't like include the whole story and everything because that's your cover letter is for that, right?
Correct.
Uh, so
All right.
that's how I would say it. Yeah.
And now let's talk about the hardest part of it, the networking. So your tips on networking, how to do it, and how do you do it now versus how you
Hmm.
maybe somehow did it in a different way earlier.
Yeah. I mean, when I started networking, no one told me who I should network with. Like,
Mhm.
it's just LinkedIn is like such a black hole, right? Like, you don't know what areas you have to touch, who you should talk to, and everything. Now, my simple rule is, if you're now obviously it depends on the industry and the role that you're targeting. Now, I'll talk about consulting and then PM. So,
Right.
if you're trying to get into consulting, so it's fine if you network with consultants or senior consultants
Mhm.
to understand what your role will look like.
Correct.
Now, if you know which service line you're targeting at a certain company, network with those people, which is absolutely fine. That'll give you the knowledge, but it, it won't give you the kind of exposure that you're looking for. That no one is going to know who like Raghav or Rohan is when they apply
Right.
just by talking to consultant or senior consultant. So the minimum level that you have to target when you network is manager or senior manager. Like those are
Okay.
the people you have to absolutely network with because they make the hiring decisions,
Correct.
right? So I mean that was something I didn't know back then.
Mhm.
I learned as I joined Deloitte because I could see who was making those big decisions, right?
Mhm.
There are so many candidates that I mean, 2, 3 candidates are gonna like look exactly similar to you. They all have the best experience ever, but you can only hire one. So
Right.
now even though like consultant or senior consultants are taking the interviews, but they are not the ones who are deciding who to hire.
Mhm.
So if let's say one of those guys between the three has actually networked, they have an edge.
Okay.
That's why minimum manager level you have to absolutely network. Now that's more consulting. Now I think with PM roles, obviously like minimum I would say is like a senior PM, because
Okay.
PM role in itself is like a bit senior,
Correct.
because you start with like a BA, you go to senior BA and then PM. So senior PM is quite senior. Also, again, like depends on the company because it's
Mm-hmm.
totally different in different companies. But I would say like 60-70%, it's quite a senior role.
Mm-hmm.
So start with like a senior PM, network with them. If
Mm-hmm.
you're able to do it with director PM as well.
Okay.
Because director PM is the one who usually makes the hiring decisions.
Okay.
And in some companies, it's called director PM is interchangeably called as a group product manager as well. Like they lead a group of
Okay.
PMs.
Mm-hmm.
So try to network with them and they will definitely give you time. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
you're not asking for like an hour or something. Just
Yeah.
maybe connect with 15 minutes. Like you don't even need half an hour at times, right?
Right.
Just they should remember who you are. So,
Mm-hmm.
and 15 minutes is, I think, enough to make an impact.
Correct.
So these are like, because my experience in these two roles. So that's why like I differentiated how you should do it.
Sure. And like you said, at least a manager level if you are applying for a consultant, and
Right.
if you are applying for a PM, then at least a senior product manager is
At
what
least,
you
yes.
should target.
And additionally, like if you are able to find like a director or group, I think that'll
Mhm.
be extremely helpful.
Sure. And like any tips on, like you said, you have to make an impact during those 15 to 30 minutes. So how do you do that? Do you have any tips for that?
I think what I do usually is, so there are two scenarios. Like
Mhm.
let's say you are talking to a director in product, right? If that person is active on LinkedIn and
Mhm.
if they've shared something, if you know which product they are leading at a
Mhm.
certain company, because for example, like Thomson Reuters has is a huge company. They have so many products. Now, one director would probably be like leading one or two products, depends on the size, but
Mhm.
assume that they're leading one product. So if you know which product they're leading, try to research about that product. And when you go into that call, talk about that product. That what do you like about it? What do you don't like about a product? You can be as honest as, because if you are looking to become a product manager,
Mhm.
you have to tell the story that it's not good, right? Also,
Right.
so talk to them about that product and share your experience, like how you can add value to this kind of a product that they are leading,
Okay.
that you have worked on a similar solution, or even if you're not from the same industry, but you are kind of from the same customer base or
Mhm.
from a similar kind of a tech stack. Like, what are the similarities that you can showcase? So,
Okay.
do that during the discussion itself,
All right. Yeah.
and that's
Like.
how you can like. I mean, that's one way that I do it. And if they're not active on LinkedIn, if you see that they have not done much, not
Mhm.
shared much, then just talk about your experience. I mean,
Sure.
product manager is knowing the tech and knowing the customer, right?
Mhm.
So if you can show both of these things, I mean, that's the easiest way to make an impact.
All right. Yeah, I absolutely love that answer. And those are really valuable tips. So now let's talk about moving from Deloitte to a startup. So some might say that's a risky move because Deloitte is a large organization. So your
Yeah,
job is kind of secure over there. So
right.
what made you take that risk and work for a startup?
I think so. When I was at Deloitte, I think completed around 10 months.
Mhm.
I was pretty much in like one project almost all the time,
Okay.
with like a big client at Deloitte. And I think I felt that I had learned pretty much what I wanted to learn there, because like going into it, as I mentioned before, I was never looking at consulting as like a long career.
Mhm.
It was more like a segue into a PM role. And I felt
Right.
that, the kind of things I've done, the responsibilities I've had, um, I think I was good with that. So I started exploring, like applying to different opportunities. So this startup role, like, was a leadership role. Um, it was a small company, and I was getting an opportunity to lead a full team.
Mhm.
So which I liked. And the founders had a good vision for the company. They seemed really supportive of my thoughts.
Mhm.
So I went ahead with it. Um, I started working there. It was obviously a risk. I mean, no doubt. I
I
was
mean, had you thought of it as a risk before joining that company, or was it now in hindsight, you think about it and that was a risk I took.
I mean, no, I knew that it was a risk, definitely,
Okay.
because from the day I got the offer from them, I did not accept the offer for like 3, 4 weeks. I took like
Okay.
3, 4 weeks of contemplation, talking to all my friends,
Hmm.
all my seniors, everyone, because I wasn't sure if I really wanted.
Okay.
Um, although the money was good, like it was more
Hmm.
than what I was getting at Deloitte, but I knew that there is risk,
Hmm.
definitely, because
Hmm.
it's it's not a startup that is like extremely well funded. They were still growing, obviously, doing
Hmm.
really well, have been growing for the past 2, 3 years. So the track record was really good.
Hmm.
But I mean, if you're coming from Deloitte, then nothing is that big, right?
Right.
Everything is gonna seem small to you.
Hmm.
So no way that I now it seems risky. It was risky back then.
That's risky.
But
Okay.
I mean, there are reasons why I wanted to do it, because I
Hmm.
felt that, I mean, the role was the right one for me. It was the work that I wanted to do.
Hmm.
I was I was getting the opportunity to work on the product directly,
Right.
working with one of the founders who was an industry expert,
Hmm.
um, which was really important for me because I was not from that industry at all. So I was getting someone to work with, which was a unique opportunity, I felt. Um, and I had the tech knowledge, which the founder did not. So we were gonna, work together really well. He
Okay.
brings the industry knowledge, I bring the tech side of
Hmm.
things.
Hmm.
So seemed like the right opportunity back then. Obviously things happened. Tech overall is messed
I,
up.
I'm sorry to interrupt you again, but before we go over there, so when you were contemplating, because you said you took you 3 to 4 weeks. So
Yeah,
apart from thinking that, like you said, nothing after Deloitte will seem bigger than Deloitte.
yeah,
So
right.
what were your thoughts in those 3 to 4 weeks, apart from say the job security aspect of it? Because you wanted to be a product manager and you were getting that opportunity. So what took you 3 to 4 weeks to decide that you want to work in that startup?
I think obviously talking to a lot of people who have worked in startups,
Hmm.
because I have friends. My own wife started in her current company when the company had like 70, 80 employees.
Hmm.
So I had people who have started in like a similar path. At Deloitte, see, to be honest, like no matter how great the company is, they pay you well, they treat you well and everything, but you are just like a small fish in a big pond.
Right.
No, you can't build your personal brand. No one is gonna know who you are apart from some of the customers you talk to, or maybe your manager, right? Like it's just such a big company.
Hmm.
Like in one project, I mean, the size of the project was bigger than the whole company I was joining.
Right.
So it was that kind of a scale, right?
Hmm.
But if I would join this company, even though it was a risk,
Hmm.
I would build my own brand, because
Right.
if I launch something, then I will have a story to tell,
Hmm.
and that's what happened here. Like, and that those are the thoughts going in my head, that
Hmm.
whether I want to like build my own brand, whether I want to be the only PM at a company who's responsible for launching everything,
Hmm.
and not be one of those consultants in like a like $100 million project where there are like 50 other like me. So
Right.
that was the thought process behind it.
All right. Thank you. And please continue.
No, so yeah, like I mean, that was a thought process. I
Hmm.
joined. I launched like some 2, 3 big features there all by myself, like from like customer research to actually taking into like final production. So I did pretty much everything, and that really helped me because I had never done that even at Deloitte,
Hmm.
because it was just such a big project that your responsibilities are always defined. You're doing you're doing a lot,
Hmm.
obviously every day, but you're still doing pretty much what you did yesterday. So there's
Yeah.
nothing new to do.
Hmm.
Here, like everything was new. There was so much to do because I mean it's a startup, so they have so much pressure. They have to constantly raise money, and
Right.
raising money in like the kind of environment there is for tech, it's not easy. So
Right.
we had to prove ourselves that we can grow, we can acquire new customers. So there was that pressure to do. So that's what I think most of my learning happened. I mean,
Okay.
the learning in the first 6 months, I think surpassed like my 3 to 4 years of learning there,
Yeah.
because I was doing so much there.
Hmm.
I think it was a right decision, I would say, looking
Mhm.
back at it now, because the kind of things that I've learned, the kind of stories I've told in my interviews, I don't think I would have had those kind of things to tell
Right.
if I did not have that experience.
Right. So, I mean, in startups, because we've all heard that it's you have to do everything. There are
Yeah,
no people to help you out at a startup. So
right,
figure it out yourself. And
correct.
you get to learn a lot. But
Yeah.
apart from these things, are there any experiences you had at working at that startup which you would like to share and maybe tell our listeners that these are some of the aspects that you might not know, because these aspects are known that you have to work a lot and there'll be no help for you. Any other
Yeah.
aspects which people might not know of?
Yeah. So I think when we call a company a startup, there are like
Mhm.
different sizes also, right? Like
Right.
the startup I joined was extremely small. Like the
Mhm.
whole employee strength was probably like 60, 70.
Mhm.
So like talking about that scale, some of the things I would say to someone who's joining these companies is like there is no training given to you. There is
Mhm.
nothing, no like no sort of onboarding plan when you join. You just go and start doing things.
Right.
Like you learn along the way.
Mhm.
Like my day one, I was in product discussions, in customer research. Like there was
Mhm.
no training plan set for me to learn the industry or anything
Mhm.
like that. Like that's the biggest thing I would say. Because
Okay.
when you join even like a mid-sized startup,
Mhm.
there also there is a set plan for you. When you join, you talk to certain people, you don't just start going into things right away. I mean, it's more seamless. But here
Right.
in startups, like smaller companies, it's not like that.
Mhm.
That's the main difference. Second, there are a lot of eyes on you, and it's
Right.
it's not that the eyes are just on you. It's that the eyes are on every employee because there are so fewer employees,
Mhm.
right? So everyone is making sure that you get the results because the results matter a lot.
Right.
There is less, I would say, opportunity to make mistakes.
Mhm.
Every mistake you make is gonna cost the startup a lot. So like try to avoid making mistakes, make more calculative decisions. So these are things like that I did not know that well going into it.
Okay.
I think I also learned along the way because I've only worked at bigger corporations. Like prior my MBA, like I was at a big company, so
Right.
it was new for me.
Yeah. And that is the case for most of us. We worked at bigger organizations, and working at a startup which has very few employees is an
Yeah,
experience in itself.
correct.
So, like, as you said, you were then laid off, and that can happen
Yeah,
to the best of us. Even Steve Jobs was
correct.
laid off. So, that happens to the best of us. So, it takes courage to admit that. But
Yeah.
how did you recover from that? Because that can really crush your confidence, and once that happens, you are even afraid to face the next interview. The thought goes on, like, what do I tell the next interviewer? Should I tell that interviewer that I was laid off? How should I
Yeah.
play it? So what were your thoughts, and how did you get your confidence back?
It was obviously like not easy at all. Like it did crush my confidence because I was still like relatively new to product. Uh, the first thing, I mean, that came to my mind was how am I going to get my next job? Because I
Right.
had no experience, right? Like I had just started in product because like technically my experience at Deloitte should count, but most companies will not consider that as a PM role. Like
Mhm.
they will see it as a consultant role.
Right.
So that was the first concern I had. And obviously that the market in which I got laid off was really brutal, right?
Mhm.
Like companies were laying everyone off left, right, center, like
Right.
bigger to smaller companies. Like
Mhm.
obviously when you see the news, you only hear big companies laying off, but literally like every small tech company had also laid off. It just did not make the news.
Right.
So where else like would I apply? Because if the companies are laying off, they're obviously not going to hire
Right.
immediately after the layoff. And no matter how hot a PM job is, as you mentioned, it's not the most needed role in a company. It's
Mhm.
it's required,
Mhm.
but if the company is in a bad shape and if they don't have enough money, they could do without a PM for like a few months. They
Okay.
could just do operational stuff, right? No
Mm-hmm.
strategy, don't think about growing,
Mm-hmm.
but just keep the lights on. And to
Right.
keep the lights on, you don't need a PM.
Mm-hmm.
You're okay without it, right? You technically
Mm-hmm.
need only developers for it. And a tech lead could like do some of those responsibilities. So do they really need a PM? Like, because I had knowledge of what a PM does, so I was like, are the companies even gonna hire if they don't have money to pay? So those are the thoughts going in my head, and I actually never um, told any recruiter otherwise. I just
Okay.
told them that I was laid off, which was a reality. It was not my fault. I mean, it wasn't even portrayed to me like that by
Mm-hmm.
my founders, because I used to work with the founders directly, so they were the ones who communicated it to me. They told me, I mean, they even connected me to some of their uh, connections on LinkedIn, which was nice of them. So,
Yeah. Very nice.
um, and I mean, I told the same thing to like a lot of recruiters I was talking to, and no one,
Okay.
like to be honest, like no one um, saw that as a red flag because it was just happening a lot, right?
Mm-hmm.
If I don't know, like what would have happened if I was the one laid off in like a growing economy or like in a growing tech field,
Mm-hmm.
which probably would have been different. So I don't know. In this time, I think everyone had enough empathy for people who are laid off.
Right.
So I did not see a problem there.
Right. And like that was going to be my next question. How did the recruiters react when you told them that you were laid off? So you've answered that. So we'll move to the
Yeah.
next question, which is then how many months, like how did you rebuild yourself? How did you get your confidence back to apply for the new jobs? And how was that process like?
So I mean, the day it happened, obviously, like took me a while to sink in, and I took like 3 4 days off, did not do anything. Um, my confidence was down. I was like, will I get something or not? I mean, it also happens that because it happened to me for the first time, you
Yeah,
don't
because
know.
these are the things which happen to others. They don't happen to you
Correct.
because we
Yeah,
read about them. So yeah,
yeah, exactly. You read about things. I mean, like look at it this way. Like it's not a news it's not like a news you read anymore. It's like you living that, right?
it's the
So
news which others will read about.
yeah, exactly. Yeah, you are the news now.
You are the
So
news now.
so I was like, what am I gonna do? And gradually I started like my resume was obviously not up to date. We
Mhm,
never keep our resumes up to date, which I do now.
mhm,
The moment I joined TR, I made sure I update my resume
mhm,
because it should be updated so that you are ready. Because
mhm.
when you are in this kind of a state, you don't have the mental bandwidth to update your resume properly.
Right.
So keep it updated when you're in a good mental health. That's
Yes.
my first advice. Don't leave it for later, which is what I did.
Mhm,
So I had to like build my resume, obviously. Um, Started looking for roles. So, and I think I started feeling better because I could see that there are still companies hiring. So I saw
okay.
some hope.
Mhm,
Because when it happened, I honestly thought that companies are just laying off. Like, who's gonna hire now?
mhm. Right.
And but when I actually opened LinkedIn, I started searching for PM roles. I could see that companies are hiring, so it's fine. I mean, I should get something. I had that confidence in me. So that's how I started building myself. I reached out to my partner at Deloitte
Mhm,
because I like he knows me pretty well. So
right.
he said that we have a hiring freeze, but the
Mhm,
moment we start hiring, I'm gonna definitely let you know. So I mean, I knew that I have people I could reach out to. So I started reaching out to some of my connections in PM. So that's how I like gradually started applying and started getting calls as well. Some of the calls happened in like 3 4 days itself. The day I applied, I got a call. So I mean, that's how you basically start feeling better that
right.
you still have the skills to get it, and that's how I started. I mean, it took me a while to get the right opportunity,
Mhm.
but it happened.
And how long did it take you to get that opportunity at TR you have right now?
So I mean, the layoff happened in last week of January,
Mhm,
and this role was finalized in like March end or
okay.
April. I think April
Mhm,
beginning. So
mhm.
like almost 2.5 3 months.
Okay.
I had something prior to that, like some
Mhm,
conversations were going on in the final rounds,
right.
but there were like other reasons why I did not. go through with those.
Mhm.
But this one like was finalized around that time.
Okay, and one question maybe related to this is you said you should keep your resumes updated. Did you have an emergency fund in store for a rainy day like this?
I mean, yes, like just normal savings that
Hmm.
I had. My wife is still working, so
Hmm.
she was my rainy day fund. I would say, if
But going forward, like after this episode in your life, will you now keep an emergency fund for something like this?
definitely, definitely. I mean, I had enough still
Hmm.
that I could go on for a while. So, like financially, it wasn't that big of a concern. Obviously, I don't want to hit my savings for it. Like savings are for a different reason.
Hmm.
You don't want to like start going into those. But there's nothing I could do. Um, and it luckily did not last that long for me.
Right. Hmm.
It could have gone longer. Then I don't know what would have happened. I mean, I obviously did not have the funds for very long.
Hmm.
So, but luckily my wife is still working and she had a secure job, so she was able to help me as well.
Right.
But definitely, like in future, like both of us are keeping our funds so that if something happens,
Hmm.
we have enough money with us.
And
Definitely,
I think, yeah, and because that's the message I wanted to send out, that keep an emergency fund ready for
hundred
situations
percent.
like this, because you never know what might happen tomorrow.
100%. Like
Yeah.
keep money with you because it can happen to anyone and you are not at fault when it happens.
Right.
Even if you are at fault, even if you have made a mistake, you gotta move on. Like it's
Right.
fine if it happened. Like even if you made a mistake, you have to learn from it. And if
Mhm.
you have not made a mistake, you still have to learn from it, right? Like either way you learn.
Right. Right.
So like money is very important. You have to live your life. And if you're not like doing things that you like, even in that layoff period, you won't be able to apply to jobs that well. So to
Right.
keep your mental health intact, you gotta live your life. You can't
Correct.
stop going out. You can't stop eating out at restaurants. Do what you were doing. Just cut it down. Obviously,
Yeah.
you can't stop living your life. You have to. So I do have a fund now, definitely.
Wonderful. Yeah. So, Rohan, now after this experience which you had, say tomorrow, if you get another opportunity a few years down the line to work at a startup and make a bigger impact, would you still take it?
Yes, I would, but I think
Mhm.
the kind of research I would do would be
Mhm.
different.
So, how would
Obviously,
that be different now?
I mean, I think the questions I asked them were not
Mhm.
enough, I felt. Because
Okay.
when I accepted the offer, I did not know the revenue they were making.
Mhm.
I did not know the funding they had. I just knew
Okay.
that they had good revenue, right? Like what is good? You got
Can
to
you
know
please
the
define
numbers.
us for the listeners, because we want them to benefit? So, what's a good revenue?
So, like, I don't know the number, but what I'll
Mhm.
tell you in terms of funding, right? Like, because
Sure.
sometimes revenue is not that great in companies because for tech, like
Mhm.
it grows a lot. Like sometimes
Right.
company grow like 100x also, right?
Mhm.
Now, my rule to join a startup would be like minimum series B. Like I'm not going
Oh.
into like some seed funded or angel invested startups. Like
Mhm.
I'm totally gonna stay away from that. Like minimum I would do is like a series B company.
Okay.
Because series B means that the product market fit has been proven. They have recurring customers who are paying them
Mhm.
year on year, month on month, whatever the billing cycle is. So that's why series B is like my rule now. So
Okay.
that's what I'm gonna do my research and ask them that, if funding information is not publicly available,
Mhm.
are they willing to share that to me? Because if they see me as an employee, they have to share that with me.
Correct.
And if they're not sharing it, that's probably not the culture of the company that you want to be a part of.
Right.
That if the employee even doesn't know what the company is raising, then you're working at a wrong company. So
Right.
like, that's something that I did not do that well back then.
Mhm. Mhm.
I mean, I was just told that is good or bad, but good or bad is like maybe good for you, bad for me, right? Like it's very different.
Subjective.
It's very subjective. And like we all have done our MBA, so there is a certain comp expectation also that you have.
Mhm.
So I mean, obviously compensation will be important, but that
Right.
stays everywhere, right? Like with startups, that's my rule now.
Right. Yeah. That's a wonderful answer. And my last question to you, Rohan, is, so once you get the job of a product manager, how do you ensure you get better at it and keep getting better and better, and you're really good at what you
I think like it's when you join as a PM, depends on which company you join, obviously, but um, it's like some PMs will get an opportunity to like lead a pod. By a pod, I mean like you're leading a work stream within a product
Okay.
as a PM.
Mm-hmm.
Now, if you have that opportunity already, what are the initiatives you are taking to make sure that your pod is the one that gets highlighted in the company? Like the director can see the growth in that particular pod so that
Okay.
your whole team is highlighted. Because as a PM, you are growing the product for sure, but you are growing that product through your pod.
Right.
So your team of developers should feel confident that they are part of the vision that you have.
Mm-hmm.
So like product manager has to make sure that developers know what the business logic is. They are just not
Okay.
given requirements as they start coding.
Right.
So you become better by having more skilled developers in your team because
Mm-hmm.
they are the ones who actually build it.
Right.
So that's how you get better. The second thing is just don't do tech stuff. Like talk to marketing every day, talk to sales, know what their problems are because sales is the one that actually goes and sells the product.
Correct.
So make a point to talk to them,
Mm-hmm.
know what challenges they are facing, what are the customers complaining about,
Mm-hmm.
and you include that in your product. And
Okay.
the more you talk to these like different stakeholders,
Mhm.
just not the developers, that's how you get better because you get
Okay.
different perspectives from these people.
Correct.
And that's how you grow. I mean, as you become a senior PM, you lead like more than one pod. Now
Mm-hmm.
you're leading like multiple pods in a product. So you're basically replicating what you did in a one pod in like multiple pod scenario. So that's how like I at least would do it.
All right. Thank you. Thank you so much for sharing your story. It was wonderful talking to you. You shared a lot of valuable insights, which I feel our listeners will benefit from. So thank you. And I tell you, not a lot of people will have the courage to admit that they were laid off, but you
Yeah.
did that. So kudos to you for doing it. And we wish you all the best.
Thank you, Raghav. Thank you for having me.
And that was the episode for today. I hope you enjoyed listening to it and were able to draw some beneficial insights from it. If you did, please press that like button, leave us a comment in the comment section down below, and don't forget to subscribe to the channel. Until the next time, this is me, Raghavendra Harne, signing off. Take care.